If you click this, 2026 probably hasn't started the way people pretend it should. Not exciting. Not fresh. Just there. And if that's how it feels, nothing is wrong with you. I'm not here to give you a speech or push you into becoming someone else. I just want to help you start this year from a clearer place, because the way you begin quietly shapes everything that comes after. So stay with me for a few minutes. Not to fix your life. Just to reset how you step into 2026. Why so many people feel stuck before the year even starts. There's a strange thing that happens at the beginning of a new year that most people never talk about. On the surface, nothing is actually wrong. Life is moving, routines are in place, responsibilities are familiar. And yet, underneath all of that, there's this quiet sense of resistance. Like starting feels heavier than it should. Most people assume that feeling means they lack motivation. That they should feel more excited, more driven, more ready to go. But that explanation never really holds up, because plenty of motivated people still feel this same weight. The real issue isn't motivation. It's what your mind has been dealing with long before January ever arrived. Over the past few years, the amount of information, opinions, expectations, and noise we're exposed to has increased dramatically. Not just big things, but constant small inputs that never fully stop. Messages, updates, reminders, comparisons, unfinished thoughts. Even when you're resting, your mind is usually reacting to something. This matters more than people realize. A psychologist and economist named Herbert pointed this out decades ago, long before smartphones existed. He explained that when information becomes abundant, attention becomes the scarce resource. In simple terms, the more things demand your attention, the harder it becomes to stay mentally present with any one thing long enough for it to feel meaningful. That's not a mindset issue. That's how the brain works. So when 2026 begins and you sit down thinking, I should get my life together this year, your mind isn't empty and ready. It's already full. Full of unresolved decisions, half-finished goals, lingering guilt from last year, and pressure you've been carrying for longer than you realize. Starting from that place doesn't feel empowering. It feels exhausting. And here's the part that often gets misunderstood. Feeling stuck at the beginning of a year doesn't mean you don't care. It usually means you care about too many things at the same time. Your attention is scattered across responsibilities, expectations, and ideas about who you should be, without enough space to decide what actually matters to you. That's why forcing yourself into big plans rarely works. Big plans demand clarity, and clarity doesn't show up when your mind is overloaded. You can want change deeply and still feel unable to move because the system you're operating in is already stretched thin. This is why so many people drift into a year instead of starting it. Not because they failed, but because they never had a moment to pause, breathe, and reset before moving forward. If you've felt that quiet resistance, it doesn't mean 2026 is already slipping away. It means you're starting from a crowded mental space. And before anything meaningful can take shape, that space needs to settle. That's what this video is really about. Not adding pressure. Not demanding discipline. But understanding what's actually been pulling your attention apart, so you can begin this year with a little more clarity and a lot less noise. One of the biggest mistakes people make when starting a new year is assuming the problem is effort. They look back at past years and think, I didn't push hard enough. Or, I wasn't disciplined enough. So they decide that 2026 will be different if they just demand more from themselves. But that idea doesn't match how people actually work. Psychologists have known for a long time that willpower is not an unlimited resource. In fact, one of the most studied ideas in behavioral psychology is that decision-making wears us down over time. The more choices you're forced to make, even small ones, the harder it becomes to make thoughtful decisions later. Baumeister, a well-known psychologist, spent years studying this and described how repeated decisions slowly drain mental energy. His research showed that when people are mentally depleted, they don't suddenly become irrational or lazy. They become avoidant. They put things off. They default to whatever feels easiest or most familiar. That matters when we talk about starting 2026. By the time January arrives, you haven't just lived through a year. You've lived through thousands of decisions layered on top of each other. Work demands, social expectations, financial worries, family responsibilities, constant comparison, constant input. Even deciding what to ignore takes effort. So when someone sits down and tells themselves that this is the year they finally get everything together, they're usually doing it from a tired place, not a fresh one. That's why big plans collapse, even when they're realistic on paper. They ask a depleted mind to suddenly become organized, focused, and consistent without first addressing exhaustion. That's not how change works. Another thinker worth mentioning here is Viktor Frankl. He didn't study people in comfortable conditions. He studied them under extreme pressure, where energy was scarce and uncertainty was constant. One of the things he noticed was that people didn't survive or grow through force or intensity. They did it by finding meaning in small, deliberate choices, even when circumstances were overwhelming. That idea applies directly to how you start 2026. If you treat the year like a performance, something you have to conquer or prove yourself in, your mind pushes back. But if you treat it like a series of meaningful choices, made with intention instead of pressure, your system stays open. This is why trying to overhaul everything at once rarely works. It overwhelms the same mental resources you're already short on. What works better is starting from a place of respect for where you actually are, not where you think you should be. 2026 doesn't need you at full strength on day one. It needs you clear enough to choose one thing and follow through without burning yourself out. When people understand this, something shifts. They stop treating change like a test of character and start treating it like a process that needs the right conditions. And when the conditions are right, effort stops feeling like a fight. It becomes something you can sustain, instead of something you have to force. Once you understand why starting feels hard and why big plans fall apart, the next question becomes more practical. What actually works in the real world, for real people, when life is busy and energy isn't unlimited? The answer is usually simpler than people expect. There's a story about Jerry Seinfeld that gets passed around a lot, and this one is true. Early in his career, when he was still trying to get better as a comedian, he gave himself a very basic rule. Every day, he would write jokes. Not for hours. Not until they were perfect. Just enough to say he showed up. And every day he did it, he put an X on a calendar. The goal wasn't brilliance. The goal was not breaking the chain. What's interesting about that isn't the calendar trick. It's the mindset behind it. He wasn't trying to win the year in one move. He was protecting something much smaller, the habit of returning to the work, even when he didn't feel inspired. That idea shows up again and again when you look at how people actually make progress. Writers, athletes, artists, founders. Not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through steady returns to one meaningful action. This matters for 2026, because most people don't get stuck due to lack of ambition. They get stuck because they keep aiming for a version of themselves that only exists on their best days. Real life doesn't run on best days. It runs on normal ones. If you wait until everything feels aligned, you'll keep waiting. If you demand perfection from the start, you'll quietly avoid starting at all. But if you choose one small action that fits into the life you already have, progress becomes something you can actually live with. This isn't about lowering standards. It's about choosing standards that don't collapse the moment life gets messy. So instead of asking how to transform your entire year, ask something more grounded. What's one thing you can return to consistently, even when motivation is low? Something simple enough that it doesn't require hype, but meaningful enough that it moves you forward. That's how momentum is built. Not loudly. Not all at once. But through repetition that doesn't exhaust you. And before we go any further, let me pause here for a second. If you're the kind of person who wants this kind of perspective more than once, not just at the start of the year but throughout it, that's what this channel is here for. No yelling. No pressure. Just honest ideas, grounded in real psychology and real life, for moments when you need to think clearly again. If that sounds useful to you as you move through 2026, consider subscribing. You'll always find something here that respects where you are, not where you're supposed to be. Alright. Let's bring this home. Let me share something that sounds almost too simple, but ends up changing a lot for people who feel stuck. Most of the time, when you're not moving forward, it's not because you don't know what to do. It's because everything feels equally important. When that happens, the mind freezes. It doesn't know where to start, so it chooses nothing. Here's a small shift that helps break that pattern. Instead of asking yourself, "What should I be doing right now?" ask, "What is the smallest thing I could do today that would make tomorrow feel a little lighter?" Not impressive. Not productive enough to brag about. Just lighter. That question works because your brain knows how to answer it. It might be replying to one email you've been avoiding. Going for a short walk without your phone. Writing down one thought that's been looping in your head. Doing something that closes a mental tab instead of opening a new one. Those small closures matter more than people realize. There's research showing that unfinished tasks stay active in your mind, quietly draining energy even when you're not working on them. Psychologists call it the Zeigarnik Effect. In plain terms, your brain doesn't like loose ends. It keeps bringing them back up until something feels resolved. That's why checking off one small thing can feel strangely relieving, even if it wasn't a big deal. You didn't just finish a task. You freed up mental space. And that space is what most people are missing when they say they feel stuck. Another simple thing that helps is this. Give yourself a done list, not just a to-do list. At the end of the day, write down what you actually did, even if it feels basic. You showed up to work. You took care of something you've been avoiding. You rested when you needed to. This isn't about forcing positivity. It's about reminding your brain that effort is happening, even when progress feels slow. When people only track what's left to do, they train themselves to feel behind all the time. One more thing, and this one matters more than it sounds. Stop judging how your start looks. Some people begin a year with energy and confidence. Others begin quietly, cautiously, still figuring things out. Both are valid. A slow start isn't a bad sign. Sometimes it's the most honest one. 2026 doesn't need you to impress anyone. It just needs you to stay connected to yourself long enough to make choices that don't drain you. If you take anything from this video, let it be this. You don't need a breakthrough moment. You need a few small moments where you choose clarity over noise, and kindness over pressure. That's how people actually get unstuck. And if this way of thinking helped, even a little, stick around. This channel is here for the moments when life feels unclear and you want something grounded, thoughtful, and real to come back to. However you move forward, do it gently. You're not late. You're not failing. You're just starting in a way that actually lasts. I'll see you next time.